The database, okay, this is page 53. The database we created from hard copy stop reports revealed that BPD officers search African Americans at disproportionate rates. During pedestrian stops, officers searched 13% of African Americans compared to only 9.5% of other people, making African Americans 37% more likely to be searched when stopped than other residents. Similarly, officers were 23% more likely to search African Americans during vehicle stops. These differences are significant beyond conventional levels of statistical significance. Justice Department experts found that racial disparities in search rates persisted after using regressive techniques to control for relevant variables, including the area in which a stop occurred and the assignment and experience level of the officers involved. These racial disparities suggest that BPD's search practices discriminate against African Americans. Search rates differences do not alone establish disproportionate impact based on race. However, because it is possible that differential search rates are driven by race-neutral explanations, period. For that reason, the best measure of racial patterns in searches is a comparison of the rates in which officers find contraband during searches, or hit rates. A lower hit rate for searches of a particular demographic group is evidence that officers apply a lower threshold of suspicion when deciding to search members of that group compared to others. To the extent that BPD collects hit rate data, it suggests that officers' search decisions are biased against African Americans. Indeed, BPD data on all stops from 2010 to 15 shows that searches of African Americans have significantly lower hit rates than other searches. During vehicle stops, BPD officers reported finding some type of contraband less than half as often when searching African Americans, in only 3.9% of searches of African Americans compared to 8.5% of other searches. Search hit rates during pedestrian stops also exhibited large disparities, with officers finding contraband in only 2.6% of African American searches compared to 3.9% for all other searches, a 50% difference. These results are statistically significant. And there's a little chart for you. Again, you need to go to the report so you can really see the chart, because I know it's not really that easy to look at. Okay. In short, BPD's pedestrian and vehicle stops disproportionately impact African Americans. The large racial disparities in stops persist throughout the city, subjecting African Americans to heightened intrusion from the police in their lives. Officers also search African Americans at higher rates during these stops, even though searches of African Americans are less likely to find contraband than searches of people from other racial backgrounds. These differential search rates are not justified by characteristics of the people searched. Our analysis of racial patterns in BPD searches was challenging because of the department's deficient data collection. BPD's failure to record consistent search information not only inhibits our analysis here, it limits the department's ability to root out discriminatory conduct by its officers. Moving forward, BPD must reform its data collection and analysis system to ensure that robust search data is tracked and analyzed to prevent and correct discriminatory practices. Racial disparities in arrests. The racial disparities in BPD stops and searches are further reflected in BPD's arrest practices. From 2010 to 2015, BPD charged African Americans with 280,850 criminal offenses, constituting over 86% of all charges filed for which the race of the individual is known. Expressed a different way, African Americans in Baltimore were charged with one offense for every 1.4 residents. Does that remind you of Ferguson and all of the traffic violations and housing code violations that they were hit with? But I digress. While individuals of other races were charged with only one offense per 5.1 residents. This discriminatory pattern is particularly apparent in two categories of BPD's enforcement. One, warrantless arrest for discretionary misdemeanor offenses such as disorderly conduct or failing to obey an officer's order, and 2, arrest for drug possession. In both cases, officers arrest African Americans at rates far higher than relevant benchmarks. Racial disparities in misdemeanor street arrests. BPD's warrantless arrest for discretionary misdemeanor offenses exhibited substantial racial disparities. Our analysis of these arrests is based on data the state of Maryland tracks for all criminal charges made by law enforcement officers. For each charged offense, this data captures the agency making the arrest, the race and gender of the person arrested, and the arrest disposition. As explained in Section 2A, the disposition data records whether each arrestee was committed into jail, issued a criminal or civil citation, released without charges, or released because of mistaken identity. For arrests that do not result in immediate release, the data also records whether reviewing officials at the state's attorney office found that the arrest lacked probable cause or otherwise declined to charge the offense. Analysis of this data reveals that African Americans account for overwhelming majority of BPD's discretionary misdemeanor arrests, and that reviewing officials are more likely to dismiss charges against African Americans, indicating that officers apply a lower standard when making those arrests. As an initial matter, BPD officers arrest African Americans for several common misdemeanor offenses at high rates. Although they make up only 63% of Baltimore's population, African Americans account for 87% of the 3,400 charged for resisting arrest, 89% of the 1,350 charges for making a false statement to an officer, 84% of the 4,000 charges for failing to obey an order, 86% of the more than 1,000 charges for hindering or obstruction, 83% of the roughly 6,500 arrests for disorderly conduct, and 88% of the nearly 3,500 arrests for trespassing on posted property. Figure 4 highlights the magnitude of these disparities by expressing the number of arrests for the offenses per 1,000 Baltimore residents. And there's your chart again. Please go to the report. These disparities are even more pronounced when officers arrest individuals solely for a misdemeanor street offense unconnected to a more serious charge. In such cases, African Americans comprise 91% of trespassing charges, 91% of failure to obey charges, 88% of hindering charges, 84% of disorderly conduct charges. BPD also charged 79 people solely with resisting arrest despite not arresting them for any other crime. African Americans account for 90% of those particular charges. In addition to these common misdemeanor offenses, BPD enforces other minor charges almost exclusively against African Americans. For example, BPD charged 657 people with gaming or playing cards or dice, of whom 652, over 99%, were African Americans. Although we are not aware of any data tracking the precise rate at which people of different races play cards or dice, it is extremely unlikely that African Americans comprise 99% of those doing so. Notably, in some cases, BPD has expended significant resources to enforce these minor offenses against African Americans. For example, BPD has used a helicopter unit known as Foxtrot, which typically coordinates officers' responses to shootings and other serious crimes to enforce misdemeanor gambling offenses against African Americans. In early 2016, a Foxtrot unit alerted patrol officers that a group of young African American men were playing dice on a street corner. Officers on the ground responded to this intelligence by confronting the group and arresting one of the men who was charged solely with playing dice. I wonder if he got off. The differential rates at which BPD supervisors were released without charges or local prosecutors declined to charge BPD's misdemeanor arrests underscore the disciplinary nature. The discriminatory nature. To arrest for a misdemeanor offense, BPD officers must have probable cause that an offense occurred as explained above. In some cases, reviewing officials at booking or the state attorney's office disagree with officers' probable cause determinations and decline to charge arrestees. If officers apply a consistent, unbiased standard when making arrests, the rate of such declinations should be roughly equivalent across racial groups for arrests on any particular offense. However, our outcome analysis shows large racial disparities. Misdemeanor arrests of African Americans are dismissed or declined at significantly higher rates than any other arrests. During their initial review of arrest documents, booking officers and prosecutors dismissed charges against African Americans at significantly higher rates than arrests of other people. This disparity exists for every common misdemeanor offense we examine, as evident in Figure 5 below. Officials dismissed charges against African Americans for trespassing at a rate of 52% higher than the rate at which they dismissed other trespassing charges. Dismissed African American resisting arrest charges at a 57% higher rate. Failure to obey charges at a 33% higher rate. False statement charges at a 231% higher rate. Jesus. Disorderly conduct charges at a 17% higher rate. And disturbing the peace charges at a 370% higher rate. These disparities are statistically significant. Notably, the racial disparities in outcomes for these highly discretionary nonviolent offenses are not present for less discretionary felony charges. We found that reviewing officials' initial review resulted in dismissal of charges for first-degree assault, burglary, and robbery at nearly identical rates across racial groups. The implication of these findings is that there are no underlying conditions that cause officials to dismiss African American charges at higher rates. Instead, the large racial difference in the proportion of dismissed charges for misdemeanor street offenses demonstrate that where officers have wider discretion to make arrests, they exercise it in a discriminatory manner. Okay, I am going to stop here and I'm going to pick it up tomorrow.